Every spring for the first 8 years I gardened, I did the same thing. I ordered seeds in January. I started trays indoors in February. I hardened off transplants in April. I spent 3 weekends in May on my knees in the dirt, planting everything by hand according to a plan I had drawn on graph paper over the winter. And every year, by July, I was exhausted, behind, and already dreading doing it again. The garden produced. I will not pretend it did not. But the production came at a cost that nobody in the gardening content world ever talked about honestly: the cost of my time, my physical energy, and the money I spent on seeds, potting mix, grow lights, heat mats, and replacement transplants for everything that died in the hardening off process. I was running a small agricultural operation in my backyard and calling it a hobby. The turning point was a woman named Edith, who had lived 3 houses down from me for 6 years before I ever actually walked through her gate. Her garden looked from the street like controlled chaos. Things were growing everywhere. Nothing was in rows. There were plants I could not identify growing between plants I could, and she was never in it. Every time I was out in mine on a Saturday morning, hunched over a transplant tray, I would look up and Edith's garden was just there, growing. Without her, I finally asked her about it in the autumn of that 8th year. She walked me through the beds while she talked, and what she described was so different from what I had been doing that it took me the entire winter to fully understand it. Edith had not bought a seed packet in 11 years. She had not started a single tray indoors. She had not planted anything in the spring in the conventional sense of that word. What she had done was build a garden that planted itself. This year, I did not plant a single new seed, not one tray, not one transplant purchase, not one weekend on my knees in May. And I harvested more food in June than I had ever harvested in any previous June in 8 years of conventional gardening. What I am going to show you today is the system Edith taught me. It is not a gardening trick. It is a design philosophy, and it takes 2 to 3 seasons to build properly, but once it is built, it does not ask much of you. The garden becomes the gardener, and all you do is manage what it produces. What Edith was practicing, without ever using the academic terminology, is a combination of 3 deeply ancient agricultural design principles: perennial polyculture, directed self-seeding, and succession planting through natural reseeding. These are not modern permaculture inventions. They are the foundational management strategies of traditional agricultural systems on every inhabited continent, documented from the earliest written agricultural records and confirmed by ethnobotanical research across dozens of living traditional farming communities. The forest gardens of West Africa, documented by ethnobotanist James Fairhead and geographer Melissa Leach in their 1996 study of the Kissidougou region of Guinea, are multi-layered food production systems that have been under continuous cultivation for centuries without annual replanting. Farmers manage the composition of these gardens by selectively encouraging certain volunteer seedlings, removing others, and allowing preferred species to self-seed in patterns that maintain a productive, self-renewing system. The garden is not replanted, it is curated. Traditional milpa systems in Mesoamerica, practiced continuously by Maya and other indigenous communities for over 3,000 years, incorporate a perennial component alongside the annual corn, bean, and squash rotations that most descriptions emphasize. Chea, a perennial leafy vegetable, papaya, and various perennial herbs and ground covers were maintained in and around milpa plots as permanent structural elements that persisted across seasons while the annual components cycled. The perennial layer required no planting. It simply persisted and expanded from year to year as the farmer allowed. Masanobu Fukuoka, the Japanese farmer and philosopher whose 1975 book The One Straw Revolution described his natural farming system on a small farm in Shikoku, Japan, documented over 30 years of grain and vegetable production without tillage, without chemical inputs, and without transplanting. His system relied on broadcast seeding of mixed grain and clover directly onto uncut stubble, and allowing the system to develop its own succession and self-renewal patterns over time. His documented yields were comparable to conventional Japanese rice and barley production on equivalent land area. The academic framework that best describes what Edith was doing is called the perennial annual interface, the deliberate design of garden systems that use perennial plants as permanent structure and allow carefully selected annual plants to self-seed within and around that structure, producing a garden that renews itself from year to year with minimal intervention. University of Vermont Extension research on low-input vegetable production systems published in 2014 documented that well-designed perennial annual interface gardens required between 40 and 60% less labor input per pound of food produced compared to conventionally managed annual gardens, after an establishment period of 2 to 3 seasons. Edith called it setting the table. You build the conditions, the garden fills them. Here is the system in the sequence she taught it, which is the sequence it has to be built in because each layer depends on the one before it. Layer 1, the perennial backbone. Year 1, plant once. The first decision is the permanent structure. Perennial vegetables, herbs, and fruiting plants that come back every year without replanting form the backbone of a self-sustaining garden. They are planted once and managed indefinitely. Everything else grows around them. The perennials Edith uses as her structural backbone, and the ones that perform most reliably as self-sustaining garden anchors across temperate climates, are as follows. Asparagus, which takes 3 years to reach full production but then produces for 25 years or more from a single planting. Rhubarb, which establishes in one season and divides itself every 3 to 4 years, expanding its own footprint without any input. Jerusalem artichoke, which spreads aggressively enough that it requires a physical boundary but produces pounds of tubers per square foot with 0 annual inputs. Comfrey, which functions simultaneously as a nutrient accumulator, a pollinator plant, and a living mulch when its leaves are cut and left on the surface. And perennial herbs including thyme, oregano, chives, lovage, and sorrel, which regrow each spring, self-divide over time, and in the case of sorrel and lovage, self-seed freely into adjacent bare soil. The first mistake most gardeners make with perennials is treating them like annuals, planting them in a bed that will be turned over, moved, or reorganized the following spring. Perennials need permanent placement in a zone that will not be disturbed. Designate the perennial area first before anything else is planned and do not adjust it. Every time a perennial root system is disturbed, you lose 1 to 2 years of establishment progress. Plant your perennial backbone in autumn or early spring. Mulch heavily with wood chips immediately after planting. Walk away. Do not amend, do not fertilize, do not weed aggressively. Allow the plants to establish on their own terms. In year 1, they will look underwhelming. In year 2, they will look like they are doing something. In year 3, they will look like they were always there. Layer 2, the self-seeding annuals. Year 1, select and allow. Not all annual vegetables self-seed usefully. Some drop seed that germinates in the wrong place at the wrong time, or produces inferior offspring if they have crossed with a neighboring variety. The self-seeding annuals that Edith relies on and that research into low-input garden systems consistently identifies as reliable self-seeders that produce true-to-type offspring in the absence of crossing are a specific and manageable list. Tomatoes. Cherry tomato varieties self-seed more reliably than large fruited types. Sungold and black cherry both self-seed prolifically in beds where ripe fruit is allowed to fall and sit through the winter. Seedlings emerge in late spring in exactly the locations where the previous year's plants grew. Thin to the strongest 2 or 3 per cluster and allow them to grow without staking. Self-seeded tomatoes grown without support sprawl across the ground and tend to produce earlier and more prolifically per plant than staked conventional transplants, because the sprawling stems root at every node and increase the plant's water and nutrient uptake surface. Lettuce. Almost all lettuce varieties self-seed freely if allowed to bolt and set seed before the plant is removed. The self-seeded generation germinates in spring and autumn, corresponding to the cool weather-growing windows that lettuce prefers. A single lettuce plant allowed to go to seed produces between 500 and 1,000 seeds. One plant allowed to complete its cycle provides enough seed to populate a bed of 20 to 30 plants in the following season without any intervention. Kale and other brassicas. Russian kale and lacinato kale both self-seed reliably across most temperate climates. Allow 1 or 2 plants per bed to bolt and set seed each season. The following spring's seedlings will be thicker-leaved and more cold-tolerant than purchased transplants because they have adapted to your specific soil and microclimate through one complete growing cycle. Calendula, borage, and nasturtium. These 3 companion plants self-seed so aggressively that managing them is more work than planting them. Allow them to establish in the first season and they will appear every subsequent year without any input. Borage attracts predatory wasps that control aphid populations. Calendula repels whitefly. Nasturtium functions as a trap crop for aphids, drawing them away from food plants. All 3 are edible. All 3 are free after the first planting. The management principle for self-seeding annuals is selective thinning rather than planting. In spring, walk the beds and identify which self-seeded seedlings are in useful locations and which are overcrowded or misplaced. Remove the excess. Leave the rest. The time investment is 20 minutes per bed per season instead of an entire weekend of transplanting. Layer 3, the volunteer management system ongoing. The first pattern Edith identified in gardeners who try self-seeding systems and abandon them is what she calls the wrong weed problem. They cannot tell a desirable self-seeded vegetable seedling from a weed, so they pull everything unfamiliar, which means they pull their entire future harvest in April without knowing it. The solution is a seed reference sheet. Before the first self-seeding season, grow one plant of each of your chosen self-seeding annuals in a pot or a clearly marked section of bed and observe the seedling stage carefully. Pay attention to the cotyledon shape, the first true leaf shape, and the stem color at emergence. Photograph each seedling at the two-leaf stage. Print the photographs and laminate them. Keep the sheet in the garden shed. Every spring before you weed, consult the sheet. Edith keeps her reference sheet on a single index card that has been laminated and hung on a hook inside her shed door for 9 years. It has 12 seedling photographs on it. That card has saved every self-seeded crop she has grown for the better part of a decade. The second pattern is overconfidence in the system before it is fully established. In year 1, the self-seeding layer is thin because the plants have not yet completed a full cycle in your specific conditions. In year 2, it is noticeably denser. By year 3, it has reached the stable equilibrium that Edith's garden operates at. Do not judge the system in year 1. Year 1 is infrastructure installation. Year 3 is where the return begins. Layer 4, closed-loop soil management, no inputs after year 2. A garden that plants itself still needs to feed itself. The soil management system Edith uses requires no purchased amendments after the initial establishment period because it generates its own fertility from within the garden system. Comfrey, planted as part of the perennial backbone, is cut 4 to 6 times per growing season, and the leaves are left on the soil surface immediately around food plants as a surface mulch. As the leaves decompose within 2 weeks, they release potassium, phosphorus, calcium, and nitrogen at concentrations that match or exceed commercially available organic fertilizer formulations. A study published in Biological Agriculture and Horticulture documented comfrey leaf mulch increasing available potassium in test beds by 38% compared to unmulched controls over a single growing season. Wood chip mulch, applied 3 to 4 inches deep over all permanent bed surfaces in autumn, suppresses weed germination, retains moisture through summer, and breaks down over the course of the season into a surface layer of biologically active organic matter that the soil biology converts into plant-available nutrients. Municipal tree services in most areas will deliver wood chips free of charge to any address that requests them. Edith has not purchased compost or fertilizer since the second year of her system. Chickweed, hairy bittercress, and clover, the 3 most common low-growing weeds in temperate garden beds, are not removed in Edith's system. They are managed. Chickweed is a cold-season ground cover that suppresses erosion and bare soil weed germination in winter and early spring, then collapses and decomposes into the soil surface as temperatures rise in May. It is also edible. Hairy bittercress is an early-season green that can be harvested as a salad ingredient. Clover fixes atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil. None of the 3 compete meaningfully with established food plants. All 3 provide biological services that a conventionally managed bare soil bed has to replace with purchased inputs. If you want the complete self-seeding garden planner, the perennial backbone plant list with spacing and establishment timelines, the full self-seeding annual roster with seedling identification photographs for each variety, the volunteer management calendar by month, and the closed-loop soil amendment schedule for years 1 through 3, that is a free download linked in the description. It is designed to be printed as a single double-sided reference sheet and kept in the garden for the first 3 seasons while the system establishes. What I am showing you today is the design logic. The planner has the specifics, variety names, seed sources, the comfrey cutting schedule by month, and the wood chip application calendar by climate zone. What I am about to show you next is the technique that Edith saved for the end of that first conversation, the one that made the entire system click into place for me. It is in this video. The planner is in the description. Here is the technique Edith described last, and the one that I did not understand until I had seen it work across 2 full seasons in my own garden. Most gardeners think of the transition from a conventionally managed annual garden to a self-sustaining system as a difficult, disruptive process. You have to tear everything out, you have to redesign the beds, you have to wait years before the new system produces anything useful. That framing is wrong, and it is the reason most people never attempt the transition even when they want to. Edith's transition method is called chop and drop broadcasting, and it requires no bed redesign, no removal of existing plants, and no interruption to production during the transition period. Here is the sequence. In late summer of whatever year you decide to begin the transition, this works at any point in an established garden's life. Allow 2 or 3 of your best performing annual vegetable plants in each bed to remain in the ground past their harvest point rather than pulling them. Allow them to bolt, flower, and begin setting seed. When the seed heads are visibly forming but before they open and disperse, cut the entire plant at the base with scissors or pruning shears. Lay the cut plant flat on the soil surface directly where it fell. Do not remove it, do not compost it, leave it exactly where it is. As the cut plant dries on the soil surface over the following 2 to 3 weeks, the seed heads open and the seeds fall directly into the soil beneath the decomposing plant matter. The decomposing plant simultaneously provides a light surface mulch that retains moisture around the seeds and suppresses competing weed germination in exactly the zone where the seeds have landed. The seeds germinate in the following season in the location where the parent plant performed best, which is, by definition, the optimal microclimate in that bed for that species, because the parent plant thrived there. This is what Fukuoka called the seed straw method and what traditional West African forest garden managers do instinctively when they allow preferred species to complete their reproductive cycle before cutting. The plant selects its own best location. The gardener does not have to guess. In the first season of chop and drop broadcasting, the self-seeded generation will be patchy and uneven, dense in some spots, thin in others. This is correct. The system is calibrating. In the second season it will be significantly more even as the plants have begun selecting their preferred microclimates within the bed. By the third season the distribution will have stabilized into a consistent pattern that the garden reproduces without intervention year after year. The chop and drop also accelerates the closed-loop soil fertility system from Chapter 3, because every plant that is cut and left on the surface, rather than removed, adds organic matter, decomposing fungal networks, and residual root system biomass back into the soil at the exact location where the next generation of plants will need it. The soil biology that supported the parent plant is still active in the root zone when the seedling emerges the following spring. It transfers directly to the new plant without any gap in biological continuity. Edith described this as the garden remembering where things grew well. That is not a scientific description. It is, however, an accurate one. The soil biology in a chop and drop system does retain a kind of positional memory of which species performed well in which location, encoded in the mycorrhizal networks that persist in undisturbed soil and preferentially associate with the same plant families season after season. This is documented in research from Toby Keir's Mycorrhizal Network Laboratory at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, which demonstrated that established mycorrhizal networks in undisturbed soil show measurably faster colonization rates with familiar host plant species in the second growing season compared to the first. The practical implication is simple: do not till between seasons, do not remove roots, do not disrupt the soil surface more than necessary. Every disturbance resets the biological clock that the self-seeding system runs on. The less you disturb, the faster the system matures. I spent 8 years fighting my garden, fighting the weeds, fighting the transplant schedule, fighting the weather window for hardening off, fighting my own exhaustion in May when I was supposed to be enjoying the fact that I had a garden at all. I thought the effort was the point. I thought if it was not hard, it was not real gardening. Edith's garden taught me that the effort is not the point. The food is the point. The relationship between you and the land is the point. And a garden that demands your entire weekend every spring for the privilege of producing food in July is a garden that has not been designed well. It is a garden designed around the needs of a seed catalog, rather than around the rhythms of the plants and the soil you are actually working with. The system Edith taught me is not passive. It requires attention, observation, and genuine understanding of what each plant is doing and why. But it asks for that attention on the garden's schedule rather than on a graph paper planting plan drawn in January by someone sitting at a kitchen table 3 months before the ground thaws. The garden tells you what it needs when it needs it. Your job is to learn to read it and respond. This year I did not plant a single new seed. What I did was walk my beds in March and identify the self-seeded lettuce seedlings coming up through the wood chip mulch. I thinned them in April. I harvested them in May. I cut the comfrey in June and laid it between the tomato plants that seeded themselves from last year's dropped fruit. I harvested those tomatoes in August without having spent a single evening under grow lights in February nursing seedlings that half of them would not survive hardening off anyway. 2 seasons of building, 1 season of almost nothing. That is the return on Edith's system. That is what a garden looks like when it has been designed to feed you rather than designed to keep you busy. Drop a comment and tell me, what is the thing in your current garden system that costs you the most time for the least return? The transplant process, the weeding, the replanting every spring. Tell me where the friction is and I will tell you which part of this system addresses it first. Subscribe. We are building a community of gardeners who grow smart, grow simple, and grow with the land instead of against it. The garden does not have to be hard, it just has to be designed.